Picture this, a modern warship slicing through the blue-gray waters west of Luzon. On the bridge, a Philippine Navy officer picks up the radio. He transmits a challenge, not a threat, not a warning shot, just a firm, professional message to a Chinese naval frigate operating nearby.
To PLA Navy Warship 555 on course 353 at vicinity 30 nautical miles southwest of Palawi Point, Zambales. This is Philippine Navy Warship 7. In accordance with international and Philippine national laws, you are sailing within Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. You are requested to provide your intention and last and next port of call. Over.
4 times. No guns fired. No collision. No confrontation in the dramatic Hollywood sense. And yet, what happened near Bajo de Masinloc, better known to the world as Scarborough Shoal, was quietly significant. It was a glimpse of something that was almost unthinkable just a decade ago. The Philippine Navy going on the offensive, in its own waters, against the world's second-largest military power. The ship carrying out those radio challenges was BRP Diego Silang. And the story of this one warship, and this one patrol, tells us something much larger about what is changing in the South China Sea. This warship will add to the capital ships of the Philippine Navy that are capable of patrolling all the way up to our EEZ, and even beyond. Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad, Philippine Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea. Scarborough Shoal sits about 120 nautical miles west of Luzon. Under international law, specifically the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, it falls squarely inside the Philippines' 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. Manila has legal rights there. The problem is that since 2012, China has controlled it in practice.
菲律宾3016船，这里是中国海警3305舰。
During a routine patrol in the area, BRP Diego Silang encountered a layered Chinese presence, a People's Liberation Army Navy frigate identified as Hull 555, a China Coast Guard vessel, and a Chinese research vessel, all operating nearby. The Philippine crew issued 4 formal radio challenges, standard naval procedure used to establish identity, assert jurisdictional awareness, and create an official record of the encounter. What makes this significant is not what the crew said over the radio. It is what their actions represented.
This is Philippine Navy Warship 7. In accordance with international and Philippine national laws, you are within Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, over which Philippines has sovereignty. Your actions are illegal and will be reported and will prejudice our country's relations. Over.
For years, the dominant pattern in the West Philippine Sea followed one script: China acts, the Philippines reacts. Chinese vessels entered Filipino waters, Philippine ships responded, protested through diplomatic channels, or simply observed. The whole dynamic was shaped by who held the initiative. The Diego Silang patrol suggests that script is being rewritten. Pay close attention to the mix of Chinese vessels present that day. This was not accidental. China rarely shows up with just one type of ship. Instead, it deploys overlapping layers, a research vessel, to collect data and establish civilian presence, a China Coast Guard ship, to project law enforcement authority and legal ambiguity, a PLAN warship. To provide military weight behind the civilian-looking operation, this layered approach is a deliberate strategy, often described by analysts as gray zone competition. It lets China apply pressure without triggering open military confrontation. The Coast Guard provides plausible deniability. The naval frigate provides the muscle if needed. Together, they dominate an area without firing a single shot. By challenging that PLAN frigate directly, BRP Diego Silang was not just conducting a routine patrol. It was engaging the full depth of China's presence and refusing to be intimidated by it. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand what the Diego Silang actually is and what it replaced. Not long ago, the Philippine Navy's front line in the West Philippine Sea consisted of aging patrol vessels, some of which were older than the officers commanding them. The 2012 Scarborough Shoal standoff exposed this painful reality. China moved in with superior numbers and superior ships. The Philippines had no answer. It lost the shoal, not through war, but through the simple reality of capability gaps. The national trauma of 2012 forced a reckoning. The Philippines launched a naval modernization drive that has been accelerating ever since. In December 2021, Manila signed a $477 million contract with South Korea's HD Hyundai Heavy Industries for 2 guided missile frigates. BRP Diego Silang is the second of these, commissioned on December 2, 2025, at Naval Operating Base Subic in Zambales. The specifications tell part of the story. Length, 118.4 meters, longer than a football field displacement, 3,200 tons. The largest class the Philippine Navy has ever operated, speed, up to 25 knots, with a range of 4,500 nautical miles. Weapons, 16-cell vertical launch system for air defense missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, torpedoes, and a close-in weapon system for last-ditch defense sensors. Advanced AESA radar for tracking multiple threats simultaneously, but raw specifications only go so far. The deeper significance is what this ship can do that older Philippine vessels could not: stay at sea longer, see farther, communicate more reliably, and project confidence in contested waters far from the Philippine coastline. Diego Silang sends a clear message that the Philippines will continue to invest in programs that strengthen maritime domain awareness, enhance deterrence, and improve our ability to uphold the rule of law. Defense Undersecretary Salvador Melchor Maison Jr. There is a simple truth that military PLANers often state: confidence comes from capability. A crew operating a modern, reliable warship behaves differently than one on an aging vessel that may struggle to complete a patrol. When sailors trust their ship's sensors and communications, they are more willing to hold their ground. When commanders know they can sustain operations over distance and time, they authorize more missions. The Diego Silang patrol is evidence of exactly this dynamic. The crew did not issue 4 radio challenges to a Chinese naval frigate by accident or out of recklessness. They did so because they had the platform, the training, and the institutional confidence to do it, professionally, calmly, and on the record. Hardware explains part of the story. But the Philippine Navy's growing confidence did not emerge from ships alone. Behind every patrol in the West Philippine Sea stands a web of partnerships that has quietly transformed Manila's strategic position. The U.S.-Philippines alliance has deepened significantly in recent years. Under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, the number of Philippine bases accessible to American forces expanded from 5 to 9 in 2023. Washington has repeatedly made clear that armed attacks against Philippine public vessels or armed forces in the South China Sea could trigger U.S. mutual defense obligations. The financial dimension is equally significant. In December 2025, the U.S. Congress approved $2.5 billion in new security assistance for the Philippines, $500 million per year from 2026 through 2030. This is not vague diplomatic language. It is locked-in funding for equipment, training, and capability. Earlier, the Trump administration exempted $336 million in Philippine military modernization assistance from its foreign aid freeze. A quiet but clear statement of commitment. For Philippine commanders at sea, this matters. A navy that knows it has reliable diplomatic and material backing from the world's most powerful military simply behaves differently than one that feels entirely alone. Japan has become one of the Philippines' most important maritime partners, providing patrol vessels, radar systems, maritime surveillance assistance, and capacity-building programs that directly improve Manila's ability to monitor its own waters. In July 2024, the Philippines signed a landmark reciprocal access agreement with Tokyo, the first such agreement Japan has ever concluded with a Southeast Asian nation. Australia has stepped up too. In February 2026, just weeks before the Diego Silang patrol, the navies of the Philippines, Australia, and the United States held joint maritime exercises in waters between Subic Bay and Bajo de Masinloc, the very area where the Diego Silang later challenged Chinese forces. It was the first multilateral exercise BRP Diego Silang participated in. The symbolism was hard to miss. This expanding web of partnerships creates something that no single ship can: strategic depth. China may still dominate the South China Sea in raw numbers, but increasingly, any action it takes there is observed, documented, and discussed by a growing coalition of nations with shared interests in freedom of navigation and rules-based order.
830 yards, distance 151.
Here is something that rarely gets the attention it deserves. The most effective weapon the Philippines has deployed in the West Philippine Sea might not be a frigate, a missile, or a Coast Guard vessel. It might be a camera. The Philippines has made a deliberate, strategic choice to publicize its maritime encounters. Radio challenges get released. Footage of Chinese water cannon attacks gets distributed. Radar tracks of aggressive Chinese maneuvers get handed to journalists. Every documented incident becomes part of a growing evidentiary record. Think about what that does in practical terms. Gray zone competition, the kind China practices, relies on ambiguity. When actions go undocumented, they can be denied, minimized, or spun. When they are recorded and distributed, ambiguity disappears. The Diego Silang encounter illustrates this perfectly. 4 radio challenges, on their own, are a routine naval procedure. Published, documented, and placed in the public record, they become evidence that a Philippine warship was actively asserting its nation's sovereign rights in contested waters, while a Chinese PLAN frigate was present without invitation. This is not just public relations. In maritime disputes, documentation builds the kind of international legitimacy that shapes diplomatic support, attracts allied attention, and strengthens a country's hand in multilateral forums. Smaller states rarely win against larger powers through brute military force. They win, or at least hold their ground, by accumulating credibility, sustaining presence, and keeping the world watching. Step back from this single patrol, and a larger picture comes into focus. The Philippines is not simply buying new ships and hoping for the best. Under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Manila has adopted a fundamentally different approach to the West Philippine Sea, one built on persistent presence rather than episodic response. The old pattern was this.
This is China Coast Guard Vessel 5201.
China does something provocative. Manila protests. Tensions spike. Then things quiet down until the next incident. The Philippines was always reacting to someone else's moves. The new pattern looks different. Philippine vessels, Navy, Coast Guard, and fishing fleets operating under government protection are maintaining near-continuous presence in contested areas. Patrols are no longer emergency responses to crises. They are the routine. Consider what has been happening on the defense budget front. Manila submitted a proposal to raise its defense spending for fiscal year 2026 to roughly $5.2 billion, a 16% increase over 2025, which itself rose 14% from 2024. This marks the 3rd consecutive year of double-digit growth in military spending. South Korea has been contracted to deliver 12 ships at a cost of more than $5 billion. France's OCEA has a $450 million deal to provide 40 patrol boats for the Philippine Coast Guard. Discussions are underway for 2 additional frigates and, remarkably, a submarine capability, something the Philippine Navy has never had. The Philippines has also approved a multi-year $35 billion defense modernization program. These numbers signal something beyond routine procurement. They represent a national decision that passive observation is no longer an acceptable strategy. The logic driving this is straightforward, even if the execution is complex. Maritime rights, under international law, are not just claimed, they are exercised. A country that stays out of its own exclusive economic zone, even if it possesses legal rights there, effectively cedes that space to whoever does show up. The 2016 arbitral ruling at The Hague invalidated China's expansive claims in the South China Sea. That legal victory was enormously significant, but it did not change a single thing on the water. China ignored the ruling and continued its operations. Manila learned that legal victories must be backed by practical, visible activity to have any real effect. BRP Diego Silang, challenging a Chinese naval frigate with 4 radio transmissions near Scarborough Shoal, is what that lesson looks like in practice. This is not a story with a simple happy ending. Greater confidence and more frequent patrols also mean more frequent close encounters. And close encounters carry risk, even when both sides intend to keep things professional. On August 11, 2025, the world got a vivid reminder of how quickly things can escalate. A China Coast Guard vessel and a PLAN warship collided with each other while pursuing a Philippine Coast Guard patrol vessel near Scarborough Shoal. the Chinese government blamed the Philippines. Manila released video evidence showing what actually happened. 3 Chinese personnel were reported killed. No Philippine sailors were harmed. But the encounter showed how rapidly a routine patrol can become an international incident. The risk of miscalculation at sea is real and persistent. A misunderstood radio transmission, an overly aggressive local commander, or an unexpected maneuver in close quarters can transform a manageable situation into something neither side wanted. There is also the question of whether Manila can sustain this posture over the long term. Maintaining near-continuous presence across a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone is expensive. Ships need fuel, maintenance, spare parts, and rested crews. China can field far larger numbers of vessels and rotate them continuously without the same strain on its budget. The Philippines does not have that luxury, which is precisely why the alliance relationships, particularly the $2.5 billion US commitment, matter so much. They extend what Manila can do on its own. The balance the Philippines is trying to strike is delicate, assertive enough to defend its rights, disciplined enough to avoid handing Beijing a pretext for escalation. Too little presence, and China fills the vacuum. Too much pressure, and the risk of a serious incident grows. It is a narrow line to walk. But the evidence suggests Manila is walking it with increasing skill. Let us return to where we started. A Philippine warship, a radio, and 4 transmissions to a Chinese naval frigate near Scarborough Shoal. On the surface, nothing dramatic happened. No weapons fired. No ships collided. No immediate crisis. Just 4 professional radio challenges between naval forces in contested waters. But look beneath the surface, and the picture is remarkable. A ship that did not exist 18 months ago, built in South Korea, armed with French missiles and Turkish close-in weapons, funded through a contract signed in the shadow of Chinese aggression, sailing confidently into one of Asia's most disputed maritime spaces and asserting, without flinching, that these waters belong to the Philippines. Behind that ship stands a navy in transformation, backed by $2.5 billion in committed U.S. support, deepening partnerships with Japan and Australia, a defense budget growing at double-digit rates, and a national consensus that the days of passive observation are over. The Philippines is not trying to match China's military power. It is doing something more strategic, making itself impossible to ignore, too costly to coerce, and too transparent to dismiss. The BRP Diego Silang did not change the balance of power in the South China Sea with 4 radio challenges. But it contributed to something that, over time, might matter just as much. The gradual, cumulative normalization of Philippine presence in waters that international law already recognizes as theirs. In maritime disputes, sovereignty is not just declared, it is exercised. And the Philippines is finally exercising it, loudly, visibly, and persistently.